Hello folks, and welcome back to a new episode of Red Panda Exposes Her Biases in Films. Today's edition will be all about mafia movies and my undying love for men in suits. Buckle up and roll intro! If there's one thing America loves, it's remakes. We love to say that many of them are hot garbage, but not everyone has that fate. Sometimes the project gets a skilled director who respects and admires the original, but wants to explore something new in their own version. One such film was Andrew Lau's Infernal Affairs. It got awards, made a huge profit, and spawned 2 follow-ups. So, when Americans come to your company and ask, "Hey, can you sell us the rights?" what do? Well, if it's Brad Pitt and $1.75 million, you say,
yeah, boy.
Turns out that was a pretty good idea because we got The Departed out of it.
And the Oscar goes to Martin Scorsese.
Could you double-check the envelope?
It even brought audiences to the original film, which is always a good thing, but many critics and viewers claim that Infernal Affairs was by far the superior film, with the latter merely a pale imitation. So I went ahead and watched Infernal Affairs to see if this masterpiece holds up. And I was very underwhelmed.
Well, why you boring me? I'm right.
Now, was it a bad film? No, it's well acted and shot for the most part, and the story was definitely intriguing. But the way the film handled many of these aspects was what ruined it for me. I think comparing the original to the remake is frankly boring, so I won't be doing that here. The Departed is very much its own film, and although it follows the same plot as Infernal Affairs, it has a distinct American feel to it. That's not a bad thing, but it would be unfair to compare the 2 very different films in this regard. Instead, I'll be comparing Infernal Affairs to another film it helped inspire, 2013's New World. If Infernal Affairs was a flat steak and The Departed was a filet mignon, then New World is definitely a certified Korean beef. New World may not be a full-on remake, but it does somewhat follow the story of Infernal Affairs while offering new twists and ideas. In doing so, it manages to improve on everything that Infernal Affairs did well, or tried to. Characters, script, direction, music, cinematography, editing, you name it, and is better here. But before I go into the technical wannabe Roger Ebert analysis, here's a TLDR version of my subjective reasons for loving this film. 1. It doesn't suffer from the just world BS that a lot of other American movies try to push down our throats. i.e. 2. Every man in this movie looks amazing in a suit and I can't take my eyes off them. Yum. 3. The existence of this scene.
예, 여보세요? 저 대출 안 해요. 저 돈 많아요. 에?
But in case you're not me and this shortlist doesn't seem convincing enough, fine, I get it. Let's do the real thing now. Both films start in medias res. Both leads have successfully worked their way into the goodwill of their bosses, and the police's plan to arrest the villains is about to begin. Not a bad start considering both have time skips of nearly 10 years. Infernal Affairs focuses on 2 undercover agents, Chan Wing-yan and Lau Kin-ming. I probably did not pronounce that right, but I do not speak Cantonese. Lau works for the mob boss Han Sam, while Chan works for the police, each group trying to gain an advantage over the other. Lau quickly rises through the ranks while avoiding suspicion, while Chan gets into Sam's graces, although his undercover work puts a lot of stress on him. When a drug deal goes bad for Sam, although not bad enough to see him arrested, both sides scramble to find the mole in their respective groups. New World focuses on one main character, Lee Ja-sung, an undercover cop who has become the right-hand man of Jung-jae, the former leader of the North Moon clan. The 2 work for Gold Moon International, which is an amalgamation of Korea's 3 largest crime syndicates. But when the company's chairman, Seok Dong-chul, is killed in a freak accident, the battle for who will become the new leader starts. Competing against Chung for the seat are Lee Jong-gu, the former head of the Jebum faction and Chung's main rival, and Jang Soo-ki, who is supposedly the heir apparent but holds little power and influence. Chief Kang, who has overseen the undercover operation from the start, views this as an opportunity to finally dismantle Gold Moon before the police are unable to contain them. To do this, he decides to influence the succession plan. Ja-sung, however, wants no part in this. It's been 8 years since his undercover work began and he wants out. Stat. His wife is several months pregnant, and doing this work has taken its toll on his mental health. Not to mention, he lives in constant fear of what will happen if his true identity is discovered, which is depicted in the opening scene. But Kang won't reassign him overseas and threatens to leak his identity if he refuses. As a result, Ja-sung is forced to see through the operation, cleverly titled New World, and help to pit all possible successors against each other. Already we can see a major difference. Infernal Affairs is a much simpler cat and mouse chase. That's not inherently a bad thing, but the story doesn't have a lot of room to discuss larger ideas or concepts as a result. Sure, there's a prequel and a sequel that touch on things like that, but why do we need them in order to enjoy the first film? A good sequel should not rely on the fact that it's a continuation of the first installment. The best example of this is the Godfather series. The first film is a fantastic movie on its own and tells a complete story that doesn't necessarily require a sequel. But Part 2 is able to stand as its own while also further exploring the themes and characters of the original. And it works, too, so much so that not only do critics and audiences believe it's on par with the original, but some find it superior. Sure enough, New World's director Park Hoon-jung took a lot of inspiration from the Godfather series, and it shows. And if you're going to get inspired by a certain film, you might as well look at one of the best there is. New World also tackles many more themes than Infernal Affairs tries to, and is far more successful in doing so. Infernal Affairs and New World both have a large cast of characters, but how each film uses and explores them marks another major difference between the two. Infernal Affairs gives most of its screen time to only 3 of its characters: Chan, Lau, and Wong, with each actor delivering a good performance. Everyone else is there to simply move the plot along, even though in theory they should be interesting characters as well. There's Han-sum, who's a prominent kingpin. And that's about all we know about him. Sure, he's paranoid about keeping out of jail to the point he records all of his conversations, but there's not much more to it than that. Or what about those 2 gangsters who talk about how to identify a cop? Yeah, that's about all the characterization they'll get. They're around Sam during his meetings and transactions, but they might as well be extras. What about Inspector Chung, Wong's second-in-command and the guy who butts heads with Lau the most? That's all you need to know about him to know the impression he leaves on us. And what about all those other cops? Nothing's going on with them either. Man, these guys sure leave an impression on us, don't they? And these flimsy characterizations also extend into how it explores the personal lives of its main characters. Chan has no one in his life. He barely interacts with any of the other gangsters, and he shares about 2 scenes with his therapist Lee. Yeah, you can't expect an undercover cop to be openly associating with the superintendent of all people, but there really should have been more there. For someone who's spent 10 years with the Triads, you'd think he'd have made at least one friend, or at least appear to do so in order to not look suspicious as all hell. The same applies to Lau. He's close to Sam, but those scenes are too few and far between to establish any emotional connection. He's just a convenient pawn, and like Chan, Lau barely interacts with the other officers. They despise him for getting promotion after promotion, but can't they spend some time showing us how he interacts with them? Or at least attempt to? Lau's personal life is examined a bit more than Chan's, but not by much. I'll admit this is one flaw that New World shares with Infernal Affairs. Ja-sung and his wife don't have much screen time together either. The movie is pretty long, so you could argue that they weren't necessary, but you don't feel that length. Perhaps just 5 more minutes would have been just right. Enough to see how the two interact with one another, and the toll Ja-sung's work takes on their relationship without making the film too long. But to be fair, Infernal Affairs is even worse with this. Mary is a novelist and she likes Lau? Sure, they're engaged, but is there anything else going for them? Not really. As for Lee, she's a therapist and falls in love with Chan? We're expected to believe that when they have a total of 2 scenes together? And that amount of time they spend together barely amounts to anything. Yet we're expected to accept the 2 of them are in love? Why? You can explain away that it's been several months since they've been meeting, but unless I see some actual chemistry between the 2, I ain't buying it. And no, I shouldn't need a prequel or a sequel to explain something that should have been made apparent from the get-go. Fortunately, New World is a massive improvement on how it depicts its supporting characters. Everyone here, from key player to cameo role, is perfectly cast and gives their character a good level of depth. Our lead Ja-sung is a very serious man, but you can expect that from a guy who's spent years undercover and is always watching his back. He tries to maintain a stoic look, but we can feel the internal conflict raging inside him as well as the anger that's always building up. The real standout here, though, is Chung. He's the oddball of Gold Moon due in part to his Chinese lineage, but also his flamboyant personality. I mean, just look at this guy. White suit and slippers, fake jewelry, flashy sunglasses. He screams mob boss. He's a profane and quick-tempered playboy, but Chung is also very loyal and easygoing. He may not be the most serious man out there compared to the other gangsters, but as harmless as he might seem, he's equally as brutal. Despite those negative aspects, he still manages to endear himself to us. If you were in Ja-sung's shoes, you'd be more than happy to have a guy like Chung on your side, especially since his brother-like relationship with Ja-sung is incredibly charming. Lee, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of Chung. Dressed to the tens and imbued with an elitist self-confidence, he always has a smug look on his face because he knows he'll get his way in the end. He has such a distaste for Chung that he won't even entertain the idea of having a courtesy meal with him. He even manages to boss around cops. That's the kind of power he has over people. Lee's the kind of guy we love to hate, and makes for a great villain. Also, he's damn gorgeous. Kang, while seeming like a humorous and decent cop at first, is quickly revealed to be a rather malicious puppet master. He's willing to do whatever it takes to see his plan through, and shows little appreciation to the people whose lives he's risking. Yet there's a hint of regret underneath all this, one that he tries to keep under wraps, but can still be visible at times. There's also Shin-woo, Ja-sung's tough and by-the-books handler. She's unable to help Ja-sung with the troubles he's going through, but is the only sympathetic police officers here. But even then, her sympathy only goes so far. The rest of the cast doesn't get as much screen time, but their presence is certainly felt. The other directors of Gold Moon, Yang, Park, and Kim, are desperate to hold on to their wealth and power, quickly shifting allegiance to whoever will let them keep it. Vice Chairman Jang pulls off a good two-faced persona, seemingly benign at first, but just as scheming as the rest. And then there's the Yambian hobos. Why are they here? To serve as assassins for Chung, but also to give the film a bit of comedic relief. Now, normally it would be incredibly tone-deaf to introduce those goofballs into a dark and serious film, but they actually work well here. It's probably because the hobos, while dim-witted and amusing, are still, well, killers. They're an active threat and don't hesitate to commit horrible acts even when they put on a completely different air. They also perfectly complement Jung Chung's persona of a lethal fool. P.S. My boy Ja-sung is so cute. No.
Break it down for me. Break it down for me.
The technical aspects of Infernal Affairs are pretty much what you'd expect from an early 2000s thriller. Similar to the Bourne series, Infernal Affairs uses a lot of fast and constant cuts and montages. You get your money's worth of zooms, close-ups, and effects for transitions and emotional moments. These techniques communicate the confusion and anxiety the characters are going through, but to me it's an artificial addition. I was never particularly concerned for the safety of the characters, except during the opening drug deal and when Chan and Wong are trying to evade Sam's men. New World abandons just about every one of those techniques and sticks to a sleeker and more traditional style. Thank the lords! It reminds me of Thelma Schoonmaker's editing in The Departed, which, like New World, is more stable and grounded, although it has its share of flashy and exciting moments. Maybe this is why the films are much longer than Infernal Affairs and have better characters. Additionally, New World doesn't have any action sequences for the most part. There's brief bursts of graphic violence, of course, but a lot of the real tension comes from how the characters interact. You can really feel the anger and bitterness many characters have towards one another. It helps put us into the shoes of everyone and makes us wonder how all of this will end. The film does have a major action scene, and while I don't want to spoil it here, it's a really good one. If you thought the first act was a bit on the slow side, then this is where things pick up. The choreography, the cinematography, the music, it's all fantastic, and you should expect nothing less from the cinematographer and composer of Oldboy. And the sequence isn't just here to liven things up, it has major consequences on the story and significantly raises the stakes, as if they weren't high enough already. Infernal Affairs has a few more action scenes and chases, but they lack the same intensity that New World has. They feel a bit generic, as if they needed to be there to satisfy the audience. Now, I don't claim to know a lot about the issues with Korean or Hong Kong police, so this section is speculation on my part. Nonetheless, I found it interesting how each film chose to portray them. Infernal Affairs gives an expected positive look at the organization. Superintendent Wong is a noble and caring man who is deeply concerned for Chan's safety. The other officers are quick to obey orders and abide by a mostly professional manner and sense of duty. The outlier in all of this is Lau, but since he's already a gangster, he's not exactly a corrupt officer in the traditional sense. This portrayal could be due to the fact that, well, look what government controls Hong Kong. Yeah. It's already known that the version shown in mainland China and Malaysia was given an alternate ending to appease their restrictions. Enough said. New World takes a complete 180 from this. Chief Kang sees Ja-sung as little more than a tool for his operation, and one he doesn't trust at that. His threats to reveal Ja-sung's identity don't feel like an empty threat either. It's so bad that Ja-sung even comments that the gangsters have more trust in him than Kang. Unlike in Hong Kong, the people of South Korea seem to have a mostly negative perception of their police. Issues of police brutality in the country go at least as far back as 1948, and was especially bad in the 1980s, the most infamous case being the Gwangju Uprising. While the issue isn't as bad today, it still lingers in the public conscience. And considering Park's previous work as a screenwriter also covered unethical police acts, it's safe to say the issue was still on his mind. New World is a lot more cynical in how it views police work. They aren't here on a heroic mission to arrest the main villain like in Infernal Affairs. In fact, Kang isn't even interested in stopping crime, instead wanting to keep it under control. Kang has secret meetings with Chung and Jung-gu, and while he doesn't take bribes, it's not for the noble reason one would suspect. Now, I'm going to get into spoiler territory, so if I haven't already convinced you to watch this film, you should all skip to here. Alright, good. What's one other thing that New World does better than Infernal Affairs? Well, the way it handles the death of major characters. When you're trying to stand out from a lot of other crime films, you might try to do so with some memorable death scenes. One approach might be trying to add a bit of dark comedy to it, like Scorsese likes to do.
She felt funny.
How does Infernal Affairs do so? Like this. Yep, the death of a major character done with the skill and thought of an SNL skit. I mean, Scorsese's version was similarly dark-humored, but it had a little more, weight to it. A little more a little je ne sais quoi. A little more but not this! But the biggest surprise in the entire film comes with the decision to kill off Chan. Right when we think he'll expose Lau as the mole, boom, he's dead. Bye! Chan's death is certainly shocking, especially for an unsuspecting viewer. At first, we don't even know what happened. It's off-screen and the shooter isn't even shown immediately after the act. But when they are, guess what happens? On the opposite end, here's how New World handles the death of one of its major characters, Chung. Wow, what a difference in it. It might be a bit melodramatic, but nothing that pulls us out of the film. Jung, despite many of his criminal acts, showed himself to be a fun and likable character. In a way, we want him to succeed, or at least see him survive. And because we've gotten to know him very well, his death leaves a proper impact. His final words to Ja-sung also revealed to us that Jung-jung knew he was a mole, but their connection was enough to prevent Ja-sung from being killed off. When the finale comes and we see more characters dying, each death is satisfying and meaningful. At the end, I was left thinking, yes, this is how it should be. Infernal Affairs' ending is definitely an interesting one, but lacks the same effect. Chan is dead, Lau still has his position, and almost all evidence of his treachery is gone. Yes, Mary knows the truth, and so does Lee, but neither seem interested in revealing it to the public. They give us a flashback to Lau's past, trying to convey that he wishes he took a different path, but we don't really feel that. We barely saw any internal conflict from the start, so why should we believe this? I'm not disappointed that this is a downer ending. A lot of crime films are like that, and ones that I enjoy as well. But what I am disappointed with is the fact that they present it as sequel bait. They did deliver 2 the following years, but imagine if this film wasn't a commercial and critical hit. How would that have looked? And no, the mainland China alternate ending to show good always prevails doesn't count. So, why hasn't New World been as well received in the West? Well, aside from the obvious foreign film stigma, it's because the film came out after Infernal Affairs and The Departed already ingrained themselves among audiences. With a plot that shares some of the same story elements and themes as the other two, it doesn't matter if the film takes them in a different direction. Many will believe that the film offers nothing new and quickly write it off. That's how you get a few brilliant critics like this, and this, and this. Maybe if the sequels actually end up being made in the next few years, or the dreaded American remake, New World will finally get the appreciation and respect it deserves. But why be one of those people who latches onto the popular stuff and not watch it before it goes mainstream? New World is free on YouTube. That's right, free. So why the hell are you still watching Infernal Affairs and not the actual masterpiece? You can thank me later.